Sure. So I'm going to read about myself in the third person.
Well, just tell us who you are, Josh.
My name's Josh Lospinoso.
Hi, Josh.
Hi, Josh.
I am a co-founder of Shift5, who defends planes, trains, and tanks from cyber attack. I don't know if you knew you could hack a plane, but you can. I graduated West Point 2009 with Jonathan over here.
Woo.
And went to the UK to do grad school. And then spent 8 years in the Army as a cyber officer, making cyber capabilities. And then recently got out and co-founded Shift5. I have a book out, C++ Crash Course, because the world needed another C++ book.
Why C++ book?
So when I joined the Army Cyber Command and started doing security related things, it had like a Java background, a lot of enterprise engineering that G knows a lot about. And so, understood programming reasonably well, although opinions will differ there. When I came to systems programming, like the things that run our operating systems and low level computers and things, for the most part, you can't write programs in Java anymore. You have to take more control over what's going on. And so C++ was kind of the lingua franca in the shop that I was in. And I was like, oh, how hard could it be? The syntax is pretty similar. It turns out pretty hard is the answer. Yeah. And the problem is like the language has been around for 40 years and like it's evolved a lot. Like so C++ 11 came out in 2011, kind of changed everything. And so you have all this book material that it's not clear to the beginner what's the old stuff, what's the new stuff. And like the language is really complicated because all these things nest together to give you like a really powerful presentation. But
yeah, I mean, just to stop you there. I learned C++ in college, but
I learned C++ in high school.
Well, good for you. But we learned C, right? And then we learned C++. And so the C++ that we were learning was more of a bastardized version of C. So just the evolution, it's not just like C++, it's also all this crap that you bring along from C that's still sort of down in there.
Yeah. And it turns out that all the old stuff is like kind of an anti-pattern now. And so like the point of the book is to teach modern C++ directly to people that like to learn kind of brick by brick. And like you don't have to learn the evolution of the language. It's made for people who already know how to program. And so like if you're thinking about getting into, low level cybersecurity or embedded controllers or writing, any kind of system software, this is like a book for you if you already kind of know Python or Java or you're, pretty good programmer as it is.
Yeah, no, I think it did C++ a huge disservice the way that we learned it.
Totally.
Because that order made it very difficult to discern C++. Like it's right. You're not approaching it as a object-oriented programming language.
Got it.
Which is why when at my first job, we ditched C++ and just wrote C. Like that was just, it was.
Right. Because if you're going to write that way, like just write C.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I will say like writing a book is a terribly painful, like lonely process. I've read a couple of blog posts about how much effort is involved in doing it. And I was like, yeah, I'm sure it's not that bad. And like, it's that bad. It just takes an inordinate amount of time to put book material together.
What was the worst? What was not necessarily the worst part, but the most surprising part?
The most surprising part was how terrible I was at writing. So, you go through college and you write like, thesis and papers and all this kind of stuff. And especially like when you're writing for an academic audience, it's like okay to be super in the weeds and kind of out of order with things. But when you're writing a book, so they have this job that I never knew existed called a developmental editor. So these are people with their brains work in a really strange way. Like they're not necessarily super technical, but they can read technical writing and tell you how your presentation is off. Like that makes sense. Right, so they can read through and they're like, hey, this doesn't make sense. Like it's almost good that they're not subject matter experts because they can just kind of like be like, this doesn't make any sense. Rewrite this. Or like, I recommend that you shuffle things around this way. Kind of like, what is it?
We'll keep moving on.
So I mean, like the first, 100 or 200 pages I wrote, like the developmental editors just like sent it back with like dripping in red pixels. And I was just like, I'm never going to finish this because I'm a terrible writer. Right. And I think you relearn how to write in this way. And now it's like I'm ruined reading other books because it's like, yeah. So anyway, that's kind of like the hardest part of writing a book is the writing part. It turns out,
surprisingly. Cool. So what's the company that you're doing?
Yeah. So to answer your short question in the most long-winded way possible.
You definitely want to start off with an introduction that uses even more words to say that it's going to be long.
Yeah, exactly. Check. So Mike and James, my two co-founders, are also Army cyber officers. And we met at the Defense Digital Service, which is an organization in the Pentagon that they hire people from private industry into government to just kind of throw hand grenades everywhere and fix all the terrible IT infrastructure, and then kind of go back into private industry. It's really, really fascinating. Healthcare.gov was the first example of this. They hired a bunch of people from Silicon Valley, know how to make websites
to fix it. Not to fix it. To do it.
Right. Yeah. Right. So I met Mike and James at Defense Digital Service, and they were working on some really interesting projects where, in my previous experience, hacking meant you look at IT systems, information technology, things that help you make business decisions, laptops, iPads, these kinds of things. These guys were looking at weapon systems and operational technology, things that manipulate the physical universe. They move around, they're robots, they transport people, they're satellites, doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And it turns out these things these days, for economic reasons, have tiny computers all over them. You look at a modern car, and there's a dozen, 24 computers that are actually driving your car. When you press the gas pedal, it's not actually putting more gas directly into the engine. Right. It's there's a computer that's mediating all that. So we spent a couple of years just kind of tearing things apart because there's no security built into any of this stuff. And we decided okay, I think someone should probably make some cybersecurity products to help defend this infrastructure from cyber attack, because there's nothing. And so that's what Shift5 does. We have products that defend planes, trains, and tanks from cyber attack.
Cool. Yeah, my favorite Blackhat talk was by the car hacking guys.
Yeah.
Which learned a lot and was actually just applicable in general engineering about.
How many years ago was that?
3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
How do you think the security is adapted in those 3 to 4 years, Josh?
It's not gotten better.
I know that it got better prior to them. There was a while there that was really bad.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a lot of people that have been working with Detroit on some of the stuff. But yes,
totally.
Yeah, but I think we were talking about this earlier. It's there's this fundamental missing information. We as technology people and IT and software engineers, we've been on this path to securing things, and it's now basically baked in that everybody is thinking about cybersecurity and everything we do, multi-factor, all of these things have been added along the way. Whereas it seems this kind of stuff was kind of forgotten, and those people that were kind of building and doing these systems were so siloed off from the rest of the world that nothing ever got done.
Well, I think there's also other reasons for that. I have a friend who works putting satellites into space, right? They have cutoff dates on technologies and stuff like that. So you want to make sure your satellite, you can't go with the most bleeding edge stuff with a satellite. You want to go with the stuff that's been tried and true. And if it was written in the 70s, it's tried and true, but it's probably not secure.
Exactly.
Or as secure as it should be. And I think I think you're right that these systems, especially when you're talking about planes, cars, where people's lives, they don't necessarily think, the people who are responsible for things are not necessarily thinking about it from a cybersecurity aspect, but from why would we put something new in that's just probably going to smash this?
Why would we send these commands not plain text?
Well, there's all kinds of things. The message bus on a car, it's really interesting. The replay attack stuff was really interesting. How you can get ahead of the messages, and you can do all kinds of things.
You can block messages. It's a single collision domain. So.
Yep.
Yeah, to your point, the Boeing 737 MAX 8 crashes, right? You have an aircraft that they strap these huge engines to, right? Big deal. They had to put these nose cone sensors in to see whether it was going to go into a stall condition. And it turns out that safety device is the thing that crashed these aircraft.
Right.
Faulty sensor sends bad messages on the bus, and hundreds of people die. So yeah, there's like definitely a conservative nature to like the technology that we put on OT. And I think generally that's great. But for security, like if you have an active like attacker against one of these systems, it actually creates an environment where it's incredibly easy to do devastating things.
Right. And you can be pretty sure that that car is going to be on the road for how many years? Just thinking about cars or planes, they don't get a lot of updates. Yep. Like it's not like somebody's patching going to do a firmware patch on all of the computers in the car. So
it's like Tesla was the first car company to do that, and that blew people's minds.
Right.
What was that, like 2 years ago? Yeah. They patched it. Like somebody at Blackhat like did the exploit on the Tesla, and then what did they say? Like 24 hours later, like all the Teslas had been patched.
Yep. Right.
And it's like that was like mind blowing. But you're like, oh, but that's like normal when you talk about like computer and IoT devices. You're like, oh yeah, firmware update. Like it just happened. Like, yeah, sure.
Like, why are they different? Really,
yeah.
Is the big question.
Yeah.
Because there's like a convergence with things that run IT and things that run OT. These days, hardware is incredible. Like the microcontrollers you can buy for $1.
Yeah.
Like they're insanely powerful. Like you program them in C now. So like software people can now like access things like look at Arduinos, right?
Right.
Field programmable gate arrays. There are these little chips that you can write software so that the thing acts as hardware. It's amazing. We're in this amazing world where there's like a convergence of all this stuff. And I think all the lessons we're learning from IT, like we have to bring those into OT, not just security, but also DevOps stuff and like just, continuous integration and deployment. Like I think embracing those concepts will help to make things safer and more secure for sure.
Yeah. I think we had Casey Ellis, the CTO of Bug Crowd on the podcast, and he was talking about this, that the problem is a lot of this stuff, like this infrastructure and like things like that, like they were never meant to go online.
Right.
And so it wasn't really a big concern. Right. But what do? Now we slap a layer of technology and we're like, oh, now it's online.
Right. Let's put a cell phone in here so that we can connect, so this thing can connect to the internet inside your car. And
and it's not just like the OEMs that are engineering and internet onto these things. It's like third-party stuff that we're putting on our cars. I was telling Jonathan about like if you go on Amazon, they have these like fleet tracker things so you can like tell where your nanny's going like in your car. There's just like a $100 little,
or a cheating husband
or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever you're like same thing.
They're both in the car together.
Exactly. That's you're tracking them at the same time.
Yeah. Win-win.
It's a twofer.
The twofer. So you can buy these things for like $100. They have 4G LTE, GPS, and they're connected to the CAN bus in your car.
Right.
And what's the CAN bus?
The control area network in your car is the collision domain. It's the network that all of the devices that operate your vehicle communicate on, and it's completely unsecured.
And you say unsecure, you mean like plain text, like I could hook anything up and just read it. Right. I don't need to.
You can take over the bus.
I don't have to break ciphers. I don't have to.
No, it's like Ethernet it's like Ethernet.
Right. So I just throw like Ethereal on there.
Yep.
Or it's not called Ethereal. They changed the name like 10 years ago. Fuck. Wireshark.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
You just throw. You throw Wireshark on there, and you're just going to town.
That's it. Yes. So Shift 5, one of the products to totally shill it, is it's like a Wireshark for the bus, right? So we do full take packet capture so that you can like actually do incident response on these things. Because there's no encryption, there's no security whatsoever, there's no attestation. Like, it's pretty terrifying.
Yeah, the way your speedometer knows how fast you're. The wheels are just sending messages. Going 75, going 75, going 75. Turn it.
I fell off. Right.
Turning 45 degrees, and it's just these replay messages, right? They keep sending out more as the thing is going. It's just constantly reminding the.
Yeah, it's like in your basic EECS class when you finally learned how to do the servo, or not EECS, but double E when you got the servo motors all wired up, and it was just like it's just sending that same signal every time it's doing, and so that's how you know it's doing it.
No, it's a perfect analogy because like even on circuit boards, the way that all these like microcontrollers communicate these days is a serial protocol, like SPI, I2C. CAN is just another serial protocol.
Right. And I think that the lesson that I took away from the car hacking thing, right, was a lot of people approach these things, those systems, as who's going to get access to this bus? Like, it's just this considered like we don't really have to worry about it because it's a contained unit. Nobody's going to have access. And so when we were at Red Owl and we were talking about like our ingest pipeline and all of the messages that were going to be going around, I was like, well, clearly we can't just assume that there's not going to be something nefarious on this essentially the same type of message bus and resending things and inserting data into the stream.
Yeah, but I mean, even from like an information technology security perspective, like 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, we used to be like, oh, it's air gapped, it's fine.
Yep.
So like even like we were like,
right. It's air gapped, it's fine, but you don't realize down the line that somebody's going to put OnStar on there and allow somebody to call your car,
unlock your doors, shut the engine off as you're going 85 miles an hour because your dad says you're out past curfew.
Yeah. Well, first you have to put it into test mode, and then you can throw on the brakes. They did patch that. The first, in the beginning, you had to whatever. Weeds.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of my favorite things, like on the offensive side, is if you have, we call it eggshell security. It's like if your defense is the air gap, like you've made my job very straightforward, right? Because once you like compromise the air gap, it's game over. I think modern IT cybersecurity practices, you have defense in depth, right? Like like do security through obscurity. That's fine. But like, don't rely on that. Also have, strong perimeter. You need to like monitor continuously for compromise, like, assume compromise. Like
zero trust networks, I think is the new hot word.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
That was big.
Yep.
Last year at Blackhat, 2 years ago.
Yep.
This year was all military grade.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
That just means you can drop it and it doesn't break.
Yeah. Or it does. I would, especially.
Yeah, you couldn't drop tough books, could you?
Yeah.
Whoa.
I mean, I dropped one. It didn't. Maybe I dropped it a little high.
Out of a plane.
I left it on the hood of a Hummer.
It's expendable.
And drove off.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, I think it's easy when you like live in the security community to be a little bit of a security nihilist, right? Mm-hmm. But that can't be the right answer. Like we rely on these things every day. And so I think, we're getting better every day, especially in the IT world. Look, like we trust some of our most important relationships online, and we've figured out a way to make something that was not designed with security in mind, like how IP networks work. And we've like figured out a reasonable way to like secure that.
I mean, I think that's right. The whole internet from day one was academics. If you look at every single thing and in the early days, it was like, well, why would I remember reading about email. It was like this idea of like, well, why would somebody fake an email? Like what horrible person would do something? Right. So,
exactly.
Email doesn't have security built in, and you go all the way up, all the way down, all the way up on in the internet, and it's.
So, do you think we're going back down the slope with Congress trying to put in intentional backdoors to all these types of software? Like, I mean, that seems like a scary idea from a security perspective, but like Congress is much more of an expert on cybersecurity than I am, so. Like I trust that they're doing the right thing.
Well, right? I mean, obviously, there's some way for technology and government to work together to create secure backdoors, right?
I feel like you guys are trolling me right now.
Well, I mean, the government did great, right? Because like your startup, it's not about trying to protect these equipment systems that the government has, right? Because their shit's all secure. This is about like commercial stuff, right? Like,
I mean, so to try to be balanced about this, I think once that San Bernardino shooting is when like a lot of this stuff came into the light, right? There's that iPhone that like
Apple refused to. So like we just asked some Israelis to look into it and they figured it out. But I think they already knew how. The whole issue was that the government didn't want, because then
it's going to take me 30 days.
No, it wasn't about that. It was that they don't want to reveal how they did it so that Apple can't patch it. Yep. And if it's in a court case, then they have to reveal it in testimony, whatever.
Right. Absolutely. So like I understand to the layperson, it seems really, it doesn't make sense. Like encryption doesn't necessarily make intuitive sense. And so, I could see a layperson asking the question like, well, look, like we're just trying to keep people safe and like prosecute pedophiles and terrorists and these like really bad people. And your technology is enabling them to like have this safe haven. Like what the hell, Mm-hmm. And then I think sometimes we who know a thing or two about cybersecurity and encryption have a tendency to just say like, you're totally off base. Like you just don't understand how this works. And it comes off very like, it doesn't lend itself. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't lend itself to like shared understanding and compromise.
Right.
The problem now.
And it's also a very complex, like talking about encryption, like to actually understand like what's happening and things like that is
very complicated.
It's a very you have to be pretty good at math to actually understand.
Yeah, either you're super good at math, or like you just memorize what the people who are super good at math like their conclusions are, and then you're like, okay,
this guy,
exactly.
Right. I just memorized what other smarter people than me have figured out.
Yeah, exactly. It's like Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's like Bitcoin. Yeah,
right, like Bitcoin.
Jesus. But it's basically, I mean, the fact of the matter is math doesn't care like who you are, like whether you're a law enforcement agency or you're like a criminal, like
or a state actor,
right? It's just doesn't make mathematical sense to say, well, we're going to just put a backdoor into this encryption that only the good guys will be able to decrypt. It just doesn't shake out that way. And so,
I mean, are they talking about that in Congress? Like the U.S. using our backdoors against other nations?
All kinds of, I mean, they're already using I mean, that's the thing, right?
No, but I'm saying like if they're mandating that we put in these backdoors and then like they're like, oh, we're no longer friends with Japan.
Right.
And then they're just like, oh, well, let's exploit all the phones that we have backdoors to.
I mean, I don't think that there's any, I don't think they're talking about it from nation to nation. I think they're really talking about the FBI law enforcement level of, hey, we know there are these people in the US that we want to be able to like, you know,
right, but I'm saying like slippery slope. Like
in the old days, right? Like if they were doing it all through mail and, you know, locked safes, we could crack those. We could, you know, we didn't need some backdoor into a safe. We could actually just open a safe. Like there's ways to always do that, or open people's mail, or tap a phone. But and so I think law enforcement has this view of this is the way we've always done it. So we need to be able to continue being able to do what we've always done in this new encrypted world. So please go ahead and give us the ability to wiretap an encrypted conversation.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. Like you know, the way the government has historically operated is they have a monopoly on force, right? Like overwhelming force is how they like solve these problems. Right. Like, you know, you get a warrant, you can like bust someone's door open and do whatever. But like cybersecurity and technology has this thing. It's a leveling playing field where, I mean, if you look at the tactics that law enforcement agencies use to like, you know, spy on people that have good encryption, like they're putting implants on people's phones, right? And so like rootkits and like, so you're using the same exact techniques as like, you know, criminal enterprises who are stealing Bitcoin or whatever. You just have different intent. I think it's a very uncomfortable place for law enforcement to be, because like to your point, like they're used to being able to do whatever they want as a, you know, matter of course. But.
I always think of the XKCD with the wrench and the
exactly. Yep.
Do you think part of the problem is that the people that are kind of in charge and kind of making these decisions are, I don't want to say like too old, but like they're so removed from this because like for like you and I at least, and possibly Mike, because you've been doing like you've done like computer programming stuff for like almost your entire life, basically, almost.
Well, more than half my life.
Right, but like where Josh and I grew up, and like I'm saying like younger people now like grew up with an iPhone when they were one.
Sure.
You know, they were playing games on iPads and like, so there's this like different understanding of kind of like what's possible. It's like similar to kind of like what a lot of people face in the military and like why they kind of get out and things like that, is like the people that are making these decisions just don't like innately understand it enough. Right. And like, I don't know if there's a person that could spend enough time to like overcome that innate knowledge where it's like, we've just been using it for so much longer that like these people are kind of so far removed that it's like a difficult thing in their mind to even consider the other side.
No, I mean, I think it's different than that. I think that there's, in my mind, right, it's not just the like the okay boomer type response to people, right? I think it gets more into the this is how we've done it and this has worked and we don't see a world where we can do it any other way. Like I don't think that there's enough people at the highest levels really looking at, well, like, hey, how can we do this in a way that really works, as opposed to trying to just force or enforce the same things that have always worked in the past. When you have somebody who used to be a prosecutor who is now in Congress, and I'm not suggesting, I realize that that's a topic now, but that's not where I'm going. Right? And now they're there. They know what worked for them when they were a prosecutor 20 years ago. So I think there's some of that. I think there's more of that than people not really understanding what's capable and what's not capable. I mean, that's clearly part of it as well.
Sure.
I'm curious what your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've lost a lot of the ability to see where the other side is coming from.
Yes.
And that doesn't get better when there's a very technical subject involved. So if you have technologists on one side and you have like old fuddy-duddies on the other,
or just lay people in general,
or lay people in general. Right. Yep. It's like we're already in an environment where it's very difficult to talk to each other and come to like some reasoned agreement on both sides, right?
Right.
But it makes it all that much more difficult because
I think it actually makes it more difficult because one of the things, and it just occurred to me, is so on the one side you have these very technical people trying to explain something technical to lay people that are
maybe not the most receptive.
Oh, not just not receptive, but also at the end of the day, like they it just doesn't matter. Like I don't get it. Like I don't understand.
Right.
Like if you can do that, I don't understand why. Right? They just don't have that level, right? But the other side, the technical side, probably can wrap their mind around what the other side is trying to say with regard to like, well, no, I get it. You want to stop criminals and blah, blah, blah. So it comes off very dismissive and arrogant from the technologist side to the layperson side, because the layperson side is much easier for anybody to understand what the intent is. And then you're just basically, the technology side frequently just sounds like, no, you just don't understand.
Well, it's probably super frustrating too, because it's you're trying to have like the conversation and discussion, but nobody is like close to your level to actually have that kind of conversation. And so you're trying to describe it like a very high level, and they're just the ones they keep bringing up are super bottom level. And so it's like probably super frustrating at that point.
Right. That. And I mean, I love listening to Congress. I listen to C-SPAN. I'm one of the few people.
You're one of the 4 watchers?
Oh no, I listen to it in the car.
So I mean, like,
but what's interesting, right? I mean, like just the way they ask questions. I think C-SPAN in general. I mean, I love it because it gives me access, but it also I think changed everything because now people are going for sound bites. Right. So you have these people that are now testifying, and people who are asking the questions have an agenda, and they ask questions in such a way that it's like, I'm sorry, I can't, there's no right answer. There isn't an answer. The way you phrase this question, it's like,
when did you stop beating your wife?
Exactly. That's the question. When did you stop beating your wife? And it's like, how do I answer that? And so, and there's nobody there to say like, I object.
Right.
So
yeah, I Twitter hasn't made this better.
Right. Exactly. Nothing.
Well, and I mean, I think the whole like Zuckerberg in front of Congress didn't make it any better either, because you were just like, wow, you can't even, like, it's hard for you to grasp, like, when Facebook is literally just talking about like our messages are encrypted, and they just don't seem to like know what the word encrypted means.
Right.
And like, I'd be like, yeah, like there's no hope for like a more technical.
Well, right. I mean, we're now in this, like this already adversarial space.
Right.
And yeah, you're not going to bring in a blackboard and start teaching. So I know that there's a lot of staffers behind the scenes. There's a lot of people that are trying to inform on both sides. You look at, and there's plenty of organizations out there that are trying to work. I mean, most of what happens in Congress happens behind closed doors. It's staffers talking to,
Well, I mean, if we had the encryption backdoor, we would know what's happening behind these closed doors.
I mean, I feel like we don't need the encryption backdoor because, I mean, we know government and it's super secure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the other thing is like, look, you can't, once we know these things about math, like you can't unknow them. Right. And so like you can mandate all these, what are essentially weakening schemes to like the cryptography we use, but at the end of the day, like people who are breaking the law anyway, they're going to use whatever strong encryption is.
Right. I mean, why would I just will choose not to upgrade, right? Like at Signal right now, I know it's secure. I can communicate securely using that.
Exactly.
I'm never going to change it to some less secure system.
Yeah.
I mean,
so it's not even clear. It's just not even clear to me what the point is. Like not even arguing that this is a bad idea. It is, but it's not even clear to me like what the government is trying to get out of this.
I mean, it gets back to the other side, like the gun lobby, right? Like, hey, yeah, if you want to do that, if we do all of these things, then the only people who have guns are criminals.
Sure,
it's the same sort of thing.
Sure.
It's not really going to solve the problem.
Sure.
So let's take a step back from that. Let's not talk about backdoors. And I mean, like, what are do you know of any ideas or schemes that are possible that are maybe being discussed in terms of other solutions aside from rootkits and hacking.
Hack the endpoint. Yeah.
That's I mean, I think about like Tor, right? I mean, there's a lot of, well, first of all, we know that there's a lot of government nodes, but let's forget about that for a second. People think that because they're using Tor, they're anonymous, they get in.
Right.
If you don't know what that is, I recommend you if you don't know what Tor is, just go online and Google Tor browser.
DuckDuckGo it.
DuckDuckGo that's right. Please, DuckDuckGo it. That's actually, yes, facts. But you can do signal analysis to figure out, like if you, over a long enough period of time, you can see, well, these are people going into this black box and these are people and then we see signals coming out of that black box. And based on signal analysis, we can sort of reasonably say like, hey, whenever this person's on, going into it, we see these signals coming out of the black box. And so given enough period of time, you can sort of analyze what's going on and you don't actually need any access to that black box to observe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, governments have been doing that for decades, right?
Right,
SIGINT,
exactly. Right,
human, just
right. I mean, it's the same principles that we apply to astrophysics, right? We can't see a black hole, but we can observe its presence. So are there, like, assume encryption's a black box.
Right.
Like, let's just take that as a given.
Sure.
What are things that we can do? Well, I'm curious if you
No, so I mean, we talk about encryption like it's bulletproof.
Right. It is. It's it's virtual. So how do you shoot it?
I mean, it's fair. Yeah, it's a fair point. With cyber bullets is the answer.
Only if you can spin them around. You got to dodge the.
You do the Angelina Jolie.
You just throw it real hard.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, but security is really, really, really difficult. And one of the most difficult aspects of securing a system is all the side channel and like information leaks that happen. I mean, just look at Spectre and Meltdown. They are like, even to a technologist, really, really, really difficult to explain what that is and how it works, right? I mean, you've got all sorts of really strange things that you have to worry about. I mean, like even, for example, when you're encrypting on a laptop, the code has to be like, you could have bulletproof mathematical proofs for how some encryption scheme works, but if the implementation doesn't do all sorts of crazy things like not have branching instructions in it, you can do timing attacks to like reduce the key. I mean, it's just it's like bizarro world. Like it's insane how.
Well, I mean, it also reminds me, as you were talking, like I read a book, I can't remember the name, that talked about like in how you can. Back in the Cold War, they would spy on what was actually being displayed on another computer because of just the radio waves that were coming off, just the signal.
Van Eck freaking.
They could actually just pull up what the screen was. And so the fact of the matter is, at some point, the data is decrypted. It's in plain text. Otherwise, for a human to be able to read it.
On the endpoint.
Right. On the endpoint. Right. And it's got to be somewhere. Right. And you have two endpoints. There's at least two endpoints.
That's right.
Most likely if it's a communication.
Sometimes more.
Right. Sometimes the ones we've had.
Sometimes there's a guy in the middle.
Yeah, sometimes there's midpoints.
In any event, my point being, right, like, so clearly there's places where it can always be attacked, right?
Exactly. It's just, it requires more work, right? But I think, honestly, we're getting into an era now where the link is going dark, right? Like people are using strong encryption, like TLS has its failings, but like it does a really good job at what it does. Pretty soon DNS is going to go dark, right? We're going to have some solution for that if it's DNS over TLS or whatever.
Cloudflare is pushing for that pretty hard.
Yeah. ISPs hate it for obvious reasons, right?
Well, I'm curious why you say that.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, so for
that's how they make money.
Yeah. So for people who don't know, like in a typical web browsing session, you have like a sequence of packets that come off of your computer. One of the first sequence is to resolve a domain name like google.com or whatever. DuckDuckGo. And resolve those like human readable characters into an address that you can switch packets to. And that traffic, for various historical reasons, is still totally plain text and actually one of the like low-hanging fruits for attacking somebody, because you can hijack their DNS session. There's, by default, it's UDP, like you can spoof it.
Actually, there's a lot of ISPs basically are already, right, they set up the DNS, right?
Totally. Yeah, they'll DHCP you like their own DNS server, so they can do all kinds of horrible shit.
The phone
book. Right. I mean,
they control the phone book.
I mean, Verizon, when you type in a word and it can't resolve to DNS, by default, you've opted into the system where it doesn't just default to a search. It actually defaults to a Verizon search that pushes you to some website. So if I wanted to have, anytime somebody typed in pizza, end up at my website, I can pay an ISP enough money where they didn't put in, https://
Papa John's
or whatever it is, right?
They put Papa John's.
Right.
I've experienced this a lot recently. So since I travel a lot, I'm on a bunch of different networks in a bunch of different countries that are doing a bunch of different things.
Right.
And so when you're joining Wi-Fi networks, for those of us in the know, sometimes the captive portal doesn't work properly, so you have to go to a website.
Yep.
But since they're blocking traffic until you agree to their terms of service, it's hard to get an SSL website. Mm-hmm. So you have to find like an inherently insecure website to trigger the captive portal.
ASDF.com.
And so I'm going to have to switch to using that.
Yeah. I
currently use the Drudge Report.
You can use my website. I haven't bothered.
Which is crazy because I've been pulling up Drudge Report just to get the captive portal working, and it's amazing how many times it does not work. It is not the Drudge Report, and it is just this overwhelming.
Wow.
It's like kind of like back in the early days when you would click on a link to like
you thought you were going to Dick's Sporting Goods?
Yeah. And then it was just like pop, 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 pop. Like it was just crazy. And so like I've noticed that a lot. And it's like crazy because it's like I'm on, like it's obviously the government that's intercepting these things because it's not like an ISP name server. Like it's like I don't even know how this is happening.
Right.
And so it's super crazy.
Yeah, well, I mean, so that's a perfect like segue into the second part, which is historically HTTP just goes over unencrypted TCP channel. And so if you hijack DNS and that DNS is to a non-secured website, the person hijacking DNS can just serve you whatever content they want.
Right.
Because they respond, oh yeah, the address is me. And then, oh, by the way, like here's your webpage. Right. With TLS, because of the way certificates are supposed to work, there are some issues there, but basically if someone tries to do that to you, like your browser will freak out, as it should. So you can see like the whole weak link here is that DNS, and that's going dark. So ISPs don't like that for at least two reasons. One is the one you described, which is like, they can just hijack your browser, essentially. And the second thing is even if they're not the ones serving the DNS, so like you've like elected to use, Cloudflare's or Google's or whatever, they still sit in the middle of that link and they can slurp up all the DNS traffic. So they know a whole bunch about you.
And they can sell that data.
Which is one of the other, getting back to Tor, I mean, if you actually read, when you set it up originally, you had to know also to make sure that all of your DNS traffic was going over that. Otherwise, you were it was all pointless.
That's it. Yeah, and I mean, you can set up like a SOCKS 5 proxy because SOCKS 5 will actually resolve DNS for you. I had a little project called DOH on GitHub. Like,
did it have an apostrophe?
It should have.
Dope.
Man, I made it. It was donut themed.
Oh, okay.
Graphic design is my passion.
Not your skill set. Just
no, just passion. So it would do encrypted DNS over HTTP, and then basically like you just set the proxy up, and then you can point your browser at the proxy, and it just works. But the links are going, like the point is links are going dark, and so the challenge to law enforcement agencies and is to find another way around this. Actually, I think there's some doubt whether like the very expansive collection mandate that Congress has given some of the agencies we know about. I'm not sure whether it's going to get renewed. There was some discussion in Congress about basically letting it lapse. So, so I mean, maybe they also see the writing on the wall with most traffic getting encrypted anyway. But
I mean, isn't that a win for the encryption community type situation?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a win for all of us, honestly.
Well, those of us that agree with encryption and not backdoors.
Right. And not getting,
well, I have nothing to hide, so I don't know what's wrong with the rest of you. Let's just...
You have nothing to hide. He has 5 Reddit accounts. Nothing to hide.
Yeah. Throw away Reddit 1, 2, 3.
Close.
The worst.
Yeah.
I mean, I think so. In terms of schemes, I think I like to think about like way back in the day when cable companies didn't like the fact that people were stealing cable and had descramblers and all kinds of things. Cable companies came up with some pretty ingenious ways to catch people who were doing that. They would have channels that were completely scrambled, so the only people and no one could actually buy a subscription to.
Yeah.
But the people who had the descramblers would see them, and it could be a home shopping channel with like lots of really great deals, and people would call up and order things and give their name and address.
Yep.
I remember what was it? One of the major satellite ones. I can't remember.
DirecTV.
It was DirecTV.
Yeah.
During the Super Bowl, like there was a bunch of hacks that were going on where people were changing the firmware in order to get around things, and it was like this cat and mouse. It was a seeming cat and mouse game, but if memory serves, at some point, they got you into the situation where when you applied the last patch, you bricked your box.
Touche.
Hey, my satellite's not working anymore. Why don't you?
Yeah, why don't you come on in? So you come in personally. It's
so right, or there's all these sorts of other. I think the problem is that people lack that. Like, if you have a way and you have this like tool that you've always used, I think having it taken away and then just forcing creativity.
Right.
I think there'll be a way. I don't doubt that if I think we have too much of a discussion around one particular point and not enough around, okay, let's just assume the black box, as you were saying, everything's going dark. What are we going to do in that world?
I think you're totally right. Yeah. And I mean, necessity is the mother of invention. I
feel like that's a thing.
Yeah. I
think I've heard that before.
I say that. Yeah. And I mean, where there's a will, there's a way. And it is a Tom and Jerry game. So like we will find ways to get
right. We need
information we need to. Yep.
The dog.
Yep. Yep.
Right.
Yep. I like that. I like you just keep the analogy going.
That's why we like working together.
Yeah.
Or at least I did. I can't speak. I won't speak for you.